Thank you very much. I know it's always a bit of a tough moment just after lunch, but I'm happy to see most of the seats filled, so it's going to be great. And hopefully we're going to warm up a little bit the audience with our discussion today, because although market model 2.0 seems a bit abstract, it's actually, I think, at the heart of the energy system. We discussed this morning the importance of price signals to attract the right investments, and also to make sure the transformation is moving at speed and at pace. So this is really, in my opinion, mission critical to get it right, because if you get it wrong, everything goes trending into the wrong direction. So it's really getting this pull out of the market. And again, as said this morning, when we were preparing for the conference, we would have no idea that the energy prices would skyrocket like they are doing today. And clearly there's demand for consumer protection, for price caps. So we will try to balance a little bit short-term interventions that we are facing today and probably the next 12 months, but also try to have a little bit more of a long-term perspective as well, because the market model that will be designed ultimately needs to deliver the electric decade. So it's really important to have it right. As a basis, we'll have a great introduction from Simone Mori from Enel, but we also base our work on the report that has just been launched by Acer and also by the Repower EU plan from the European Commission. So we get all these perspectives on the table. So with no further ado, let me introduce to our guest Simone Mori. Simone is head of Europe for Enel, from the Enel Group. He leads all the regulatory affairs, the whole representation in Brussels, and also part of the European operations. Up to you.
Many thanks for your introduction. It's true that speaking just after the lunch is quite a challenge, but anyway, we will try to keep the topic alive. Thank you very much to Eurelectric for organizing this event by the way, beautiful location. It's not the first time that we are discussing about market design in one Eurelectric Power Summit. Today, the debate is particularly timely, because market design is one of, as has been just said, one of the hot topics in the political discussion in Brussels, and I would say for the wrong reasons very often in the member states. And as has just been said, it's very important, I think, to keep separated the short-term crisis management measures to the long-term structural measures that we are convinced we badly need in order to make our market model more adapt to promote the investment needed in order to achieve decarbonization and security of supply. I don't want to be bookish, but starting from what is today the market design, if you go back in time, at the end of the 90s, we were facing the need to introduce competitive dynamics in a market which was basically locked by long-term contracts and along natural monopoly vertically integrated. So there was the need to open up the market. And the present market model was introduced in order to guarantee an efficient dispatching of plants, which basically used to be fossil-fueled thermal power plants, according to the system marginal price. It worked pretty well. I think it worked quite well in terms of efficient dispatching. It was, we have our colleagues, our friends from Acer, but they probably elaborated on that. The model was pretty effective in order to guarantee integration among different markets to create, they were the pillars of an integrated, homogeneous European market model. But since the beginning, we were very much aware of the fact that this centralized, short-term, organized market, basically largely spot market, had some flaws. The academia were underlining the issue coming from the boom and bust cycles the difficulty in providing long-term signals for investments, the volatility which could have eaten investment and customers. And that's the reason why since the beginning, for the room of us who have been living in this world, energy world for the last 20 years, know that since the beginning, the debate about the need to complement the market with some specific tools like capacity market, strategic reserve was very high in the agenda. So we asked to an external consultancy to make a study. If you may please show the slide. I just show you one slide. I don't want to bother you with numbers and slides. But I found that the results of this analysis quite impressive. What you see here is in megawatts, the capacity addition since 1991 up to 2020 into the European market has been analyzed by FTI with Enerdata numbers. This is in megawatt. Then if you do the same exercise in billion euros, the difference will be even more evident, of course, because of the renewable impact on the capex. So basically, what you may see is that, okay, taking away the first decade, which is largely green because there were, let's say, the historical monopolies investments, a quite important majority that may be evaluated in three-fourths, more than 75% of investments in megawatt have been made under some kind of specific support mechanism. Renewable incentives, feed-in tariffs, green certificates, standards, capacity markets, contract for differences, reliability options, strategic reserve. So basically, and this is not a matter of crisis management, this is exactly the reality as it is, this model works pretty well for a part of its job, but has not deployed in terms of investment and disinvestment signals. And this is a matter of fact. So when we are discussing now what to do, we have to consider that one of the key problems, also in the short term, is the fact that there is a huge volatility, which is basically what is pushing some European governments in taking measures, some of them extreme, some of them irrational, some of them more reasonable, some of them in line with the European Commission recommendation. And the second point is that there is a quite important gap between the cost structure of the energy, which goes through the energy market in Europe, and the pricing system. So these are the two major problems. The gap between pricing and cost structure and volatility. And this is the problem we have now under the crisis, and the problem that we will have tomorrow in order to carry out investments aimed at achieving decarbonization and security of supply for European citizens and companies. So we believe that we must keep very clearly our position on this direction by keeping separated the two problems. On the short term, we believe that there are not perfect solutions, but it's clear that something has to be done. And what we believe is that probably the best solution is to try to tackle the problem where the problem is. And the problem is in the gas price and the TTF. So today, gas consumers and power consumers are suffering on this mechanism of double marginality. A small fraction of European gas goes through the TTF. TTF price the metric, is the parameter for a large part of gas contracts going in Europe. And the minority of gas production in Europe defines a large majority of the prices in the European pools during the average year. So that's a phenomenon of double marginality that will probably be limited by putting, some government is proposing by putting a cap where the problem is at the TTF level, there are potential solutions in order to avoid that this cap could undermine the security of supply because, of course, LNG should be treated in a different way. For example, through pan-European procurement models. But this is the short term. What we believe is very important to focus on now is the long term, the structural modification of the market, which is not a modification, it's more an integration. We believe that we are facing a kind of turning point if you don't act now, the experience of member states is that we will see many specific local mechanisms aimed at procuring the needed amount of renewable, the needed amount of flexibility, the needed amount of storage, the needed amount of reserve through specific mechanisms. These are usually uncoordinated. This will lead to a clear fragmentation of the market because it will be very, very difficult for Acer to keep under control all this stuff coming at local level. So we don't have the time to discuss in detail the solution, but just to open up the discussion with the panelists, we believe that we should go ahead. We are very much appreciating the opening to the issue of long-term contractualization, which is very, very important. Introducing mechanism aimed at creating a liquidity in a PPA market, probably to a standardized, homogeneous pan-European PPA platform with some kind of a push for subscribing this kind of contracts on the supply side, but especially on the demand side. We believe that a better coordination among the different tools and the different resources that have to be provided in the market has to be put in place. Again, just in order to have not only geographical fragmentation, but also fragmentation among the different slices, different parts of the market. We believe also that a better level of planning in order to have the right tendering procedures, in order to put together centralized standards. When you have a target, you need somebody buying for what you need in order to achieve the target. And the market autonomous dynamics has to be put in place. And we also believe that after some time of adaptation, when the higher level of liquidity in this market may be present, we should help and push for a more active participation on the demand side, asking retailers and customers to buy bundled service, to buy the right amount of energy with the right amount of renewables, with the right amount of security of supply, the right amount of flexibility. It's a quite ambitious challenge, but we believe the time is now. Otherwise, clearly the evolution will be a more and more marginal market model, more or less similar to what we have today, and a large part of the new investment going into some parallel schemes supporting basically the investment in renewables and the needed backup in terms of storage, flexibility, and reserve that you have to put in place in order to complement renewable investment. So those are the topics. I hope that today, the panel could debate those topics and also put in place introduce some more specific solution. But again, as has been said in the introduction, keeping clearly separated the crisis management to the structural need of reform, I think is number one priority for today's debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simone. And I think you perfectly explained that it's not easy to design the new market model given all the interconnected complexities, and that we're moving from a marginal pricing model to, I would say, much more CapEx-based pricing model. And then also with the need for more flexibility and how do you price in flexibility. So we're going to try to explore that a little bit further. But before we do that with the esteemed panel, we have 2 questions for the audience, again through the way we did it this morning as well, slido.com. And just as an input for the conversation to feel a little bit where you think the market will go. So let's start with the first question, if possible. The reason for asking you this question is we have an internal market. The plan is to move to the 2.0 version of that internal market. But in the same time, there is a lot of needs and asking from politicians to put price caps in place. We see almost a re-regulation of free markets. So basically the question to you is, do you think that the internal electricity market will survive? Or with everything that's happening at the moment, we might go back to, I would say, a much more controlled and regulated, integrated energy system? It's a bit of a provocative question, but I think it's good input from you as the experts in Europe. Well, the two extremes are a bit competing. Confident still heading versus non-confident on number 2 positions. But I think confident plus very confident, it's still the majority. Okay, excellent. I mean, we're going to do it a bit quick and fast, but I think it gives a good pulse. I would say it's fair to say if we combine 2 and 1, we have a good majority that is confident, although 30% is not confident, which is still 1/3 of the population. So work to do, and that's going to be good input for the conversation. Can we go to the second question, please? This is already going a little bit more in assuming we will keep great internal markets. What are the key points that we need to put on top of the priority list when designing this new market? So what are the priorities when setting up the new future-proof energy market? And think future-proof, so that means for the next decade at a minimum. Vos points, s'il vous plaît. They're coming in. Long-term markets to drive the energy transition. Enhance demand response and flexibility on number 2. That's an interesting one. Better coordination for planning of large-scale generation and grid infrastructure. That's a bit more the strategic planning. Okay, this is good input. I think number 1, so the top 3 are interesting. So long-term, right signals for energy transition, demand response and flexibility that needs to come into the play, and better coordination for large-scale generation and grid infrastructure. Okay, perfect. I think fantastic input for the discussion, and it's spot on. So let me bring on stage our dear panel. We have a very great group of people. So first of all, please, Christophe Jean Screux, please come to the stage. Christophe is head of Department of Electricity at Acer, so has been working on the market modeling. Please, warm welcome to Christophe. I would like to invite Monique Gooyens to the stage. Monique is Director General of BEUC, which is the Association of Energy Consumers. So she's representing the consumer on behalf of all of us. Paula Pino, please come to the stage. Paula is Director of Just Transition, Consumers and Energy Efficiency at the European Commission. So very important to have Paula with us. And last but not least, of course, Simone Mori will give us the great introduction presentation. So the weight on your shoulders is high, because in the next 30 minutes we're going to try to give a bit of direction on how this future market will look like. And we're good citizens, so we're going to start with a question to a lady, and of course also to the person that to a large extent will define how this will be translated in regulatory guidelines. So Paula, could you perhaps comment on the big questions of how are we going to make, what are your ideas, the Commission's idea to shape the future energy markets, to set ourselves up for success in the energy transition?
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation. Good opportunity to finally meet personally many of you and to have direct conversations, not just behind the screens. Now, I think first to be said, because there's so much questioning now of the energy internal market and the electricity internal market, that maybe we need to set here a bit the scene. The current electricity market at EU level has delivered immense benefits. It has allowed for flexibility. It has allowed for energy security, which is a topic which is also very much on the agenda. And it has delivered also on the consumer front in order to enable choice, to enable liberalization, which has brought competition. So I think we should first start from that. This being said, it is clear that it is now also being tested. And we've seen skyrocketing prices both on the gas front, on the electricity, wholesale, retail, and this is really also shaking the market and leading to questioning, did we get it right? What do we need to look at it with the new eyes? And we have shown that we are open to it, but again, and we'll certainly have the occasion also to discuss the ACER report, which among its many conclusions stated that only last year it has brought the electricity internal market or helped reduce costs by about 34 billion alone in 2021. So I think this needs to be acknowledged and borne in mind. This being said, against the current context, we need to take a step back and see maybe there's something that can be improved, that can be changed, that can reflect a modern electricity system. How can we better protect consumers? How can we deliver more affordable electricity? How can we make the market more robust and resilient? And indeed, how we adjust to the new objectives, notably of the Green Deal, which aim at a very high decarbonization and a very high electrification. And in this sense, and since last autumn, the Commission has been putting forward several measures. First, with the famous toolbox, where we have identified short-term measures, mainly to be adopted by member states, and which have been taken up by several member states in the form of vouchers, in the form of subsidizing gas wherever it was meant for electricity generation, etc. Then, however, there is and continue to be an immense pressure on the side of the prices, which has been exacerbated, of course, by the war in Ukraine, and which has led to further increases. And also in the various recent European Councils, a very clear message in terms of let's look into whether we have to adjust, modernize, but we have gone from a discussion between what you indicated, the short-term and the long-term measures. What is it that can be done imminently, and what is it that maybe needs to be done also in the mid and the longer term? And starting with the longer term, and I think there the scene is very, very clear. The more we will decarbonize the electricity system with renewables, with energy efficiency, with savings wherever we can achieve them, this will bring structural benefits. Now, in the midterm, however, we do need indeed to look, because the electricity market has changed, because the energy mix has changed immensely over the past years. So there is a moment and an opportunity to look into the existing framework and see how can we, and is there other issues that deserve being reviewed, revisited, modernized. And that's where we've identified issues that we are now looking into and will be subject to an impact assessment. And needless to say, in order to look into the options, we will be consulting, we will be reaching out to stakeholders, to industry, to consumers, to see indeed what is it that we can improve. And that's part of any growing, of any development, is really to see where can we improve. We have identified some very concrete issues which have been put forward in the Repower EU communication of the 18th of May. How can we, for instance, ensure that consumers have a sufficient variety of contract types that suit their needs? Is there a real understanding for consumers between what is the contracts with a fixed price, with a variety of prices, what is the spot market, what are the long-term contracts? How can we protect consumers from the risk of supplier failure, which has also been very much now on the news? We don't want to overburden the supplier of last resort, which is a safeguard which is foreseen in the current regulatory framework, but which has never been as much used as it is in the last month. And indeed, is there a need to break the link between the gas and electricity price? And this is a big question which is out there, and we are looking into it. What are the measures necessary to ensure that hedging can take place, where it's not always the case? How can we move support schemes to contracts for difference, also in view of further helping consumers? So just to give you some elements which we will be looking into, as said, in close dialogue with all the stakeholders concerned, and many of them are represented here in this room today. And we've started this work in this sense, but indeed this will be a mid-term delivery and not the short term. And that's also important to make the case, the distinction between what can be achieved immediately, imminently, and what can only be achieved in the mid and the long term. And I would leave it at this for the moment.
Thank you, thank you. Well, you throw in even more components to the menu we need to create, but very, very good overview. Thank you. Perhaps good to move to Christophe from Acer. You have been working on, I would say, similar guidelines and suggestions. What would be your priority in terms of measures, perhaps short-term versus long-term? Can you give your perspective?
Can you hear? Yeah. So good afternoon. Thank you for the questions. Let me start straight away to say that I don't believe in the silver bullet solution. I'm a bit concerned by all this discussion about the short-term measures. I tend to believe that most of the time they are taken in the rush, without coordination, and most of the time they are inefficient, ineffective, and could even be counterproductive. The only short-term measure that I could imagine, which we really need to put in place, should aim at vulnerable consumers, and also maybe the industries which is subject to global competition. But apart from that, I'm a bit reluctant to rush into short-term measures. Maybe one important lesson that we have to learn from the crisis is that for the future, is that we definitely need to be more prepared. And going forward, we will need to take the time to discuss, to define and implement ex-ante measures to deal with this kind of crisis situation. And I insist on the word ex-ante measures because we have to limit the uncertainty for investors, and on one hand, but we'll have also to mitigate the impact for consumers. So again, we need to take the time to define, to debate, to define and implement some ex-ante measures. In our report, in the Acer's April report, we gave a few possible ideas of such ex-ante measures, like, for instance, the relief valve concept, the affordability options, and more broadly, the cap and floor system, which could be a good compromise between the objective of to protect consumers, vulnerable consumers on one hand, but also to let the market work on the other hand. So from Acer's side, we are happy to contribute under the European Commission's leadership to this debate. We strongly invite the European Commission to take the time to make a proper impact assessment of these long-term measures. Let's not rush. This is the best recipe for a failure. And in the meantime, while we will work under the European Commission leadership to define and maybe implement this ex-ante long-term measure, in the meantime, we should not forget that we have still a lot to do to implement what was agreed upon, because these days we discuss a lot what we cannot yet agree upon, while there is a huge list of projects that were agreed upon and that we still need to implement, and which could make a big difference and which could at least significantly mitigate the impact of high energy prices in Europe. I will not give you this long list of projects, but just to mention two. The first one is the integration of the balancing market in Europe. This is an important project. And the other one is the famous 70%. Last week, the 70% is the target that we all agreed upon to implement by the end of 2025, and whose purpose is to increase the volume of cross-border trade made available to the market by TSOs. Last Friday, we published the third edition of our market monitoring report on this 70%, and there is very, very limited progress, to say the least, in Europe, in particular in the core region. And again, this is something we agreed upon. We agreed to implement this target, and there is no progress. So yeah, I urge member states, TSOs, NRS, and hopefully with the support of the European Commission, to make sure that all these projects which will improve the market, which will foster the market integration process, and will mitigate the impact of these high energy prices, to have a look and to make sure that all these projects will be implemented timely.
Thank you, Christophe. Some clear, concrete recommendations here. Let's shift gears a bit and go to the consumer side. So Monique, you represent the 350 million European consumers, or something, or 400 million. I don't even know how many we have. Could you give your perspective on the short term versus long term, and your vision on where we need to improve?
Can I just rectify? I don't claim that I represent the consumers, but
sorry, my words. I'm a bit free here.
Yeah, but I'm just representing consumer organizations who are in daily contact with people, and they know what's happening on the market. I just would like to say we speak about energy prices and energy bills. But from the consumer perspective, the price volatility in the energy market has not only an impact on their energy bill, but also on their food bill and on many other bills. So it's a rebound effect all over the market. So from the consumer perspective, it's quite dramatic what's happening. Now, when it comes to short-term measures, what people need, and there I would like to follow up on what you said, Christophe, because yes, we welcome the toolbox. We thought it was really that was published in October, and that has been taken up by many member states. But we have the feeling that in several cases, member states have rushed the measures through without really thinking about it. And so you said they can be inefficient, and I would also say they can be unfair and discriminatory. How many of you live in Belgium? Raise your hand. So I think you have been beneficiaries of a €100 reduction of your energy bill. All of you, including me, don't need that. We can still go out, we can still pay our food bill. However, there are people in vulnerability, like Christophe mentioned, who have major problems and who next month cannot pay their bill. And so what we are asking for, and we have been asking for, is targeted measures to those that cannot afford to pay their energy bill. So it's not a niche issue. It's also now hitting middle-class consumers, middle-income consumers. And what I would like to say is that it's the most vulnerable that pay in absolute value the highest energy bill because they have the less well-insulated house. Maybe you have a passive house, so your energy bill is anyway not high. So it's very important to really be, let's say, engage into positive discrimination and help those who need it most with the intensity that they need most, meaning that first of all, member states need to tackle the elephant in the room. They don't like to speak about energy poverty. They don't like to tackle that. And they need to identify those who are the most vulnerable, can talk to consumer organizations, can talk to social workers, municipalities. Those organizations have very well identified. And vouchers are maybe not the best method. Sometimes very short-term energy efficiency measures can help much more than a €100 voucher. For example, we have tested it in several countries, €30 to insulate your water boiler, €30, one-shot investments. You can do it yourself. You buy it in the shop, in a supermarket, or in a brico shop or something, do-it-yourself shop. And this can lead to savings in the water bill, in the energy, hot water bill of hundreds of euros and over years. So this is the type of things that people need. The support is not necessarily just sending you a voucher. It's really addressing specifically, with a short-term measure, a long-term effect. So that is something that we would certainly want to see addressed. And with the winter coming, or not yet, but we need to prepare. It is key that a ban on disconnections, which was one of the tools that has been proposed by the European Commission, is being rolled out. People should not be disconnected because the market is dysfunctioning. That's very important. Now, more for the medium term, what I would like to say, there are plenty of measures that are certainly consumer-friendly in the medium term, and let me go back to the basics. If you want a well-functioning energy market for consumers, you need to help consumers understand what they are paying for the energy that they are, and the electricity that they are consuming. I brought my energy contract with me. I'm transparent, you can see it. It's for, I'm an educated consumer, I'm a lawyer. I know where to look for and what to look for. I don't understand the price of my energy contract because it's full of tables, I can even not read them. That's maybe because I'm an old educated consumer, but still, it is, you see that it is not, well, I mean, European population is aging, so you should take account of those vulnerabilities when you prepare an energy contract. So please, energy and electricity providers, please provide understandable price information. That's the number one condition if you want consumers to be engaged in the energy market. Then what we would like to say is, of course, because Paula also mentioned energy efficiency. For consumers, this is the no-brainer. Investment number one, energy-efficient homes. It's not only about the heating, it's about the electricity, the electrical appliances. And this is really something that we want to see addressed as a priority in all the policy measures that are going to be rolled out. Second, heat pumps. Heat pumps are the most efficient heating device we have and the most economic. We have done a lot of studies that are all corroborating. And my personal message to the person who was passionately promoting hydrogen in the panel just before, for consumers, in residential heating, forget about hydrogen. This is locking consumers in a very costly, energy inefficient future. So we are all for heat pumps.
100%.
Now maybe I'm liked by some and unliked by others. And the last thing that I would like to say is, of course, solar panels is also something that should be totally, let's say, rolled out as far as possible and with a lot of support for consumers because it's also part of the mix. What I would like to say is that, of course, people need support. You cannot just let it rest on the shoulders of the individual consumer to make all those steps, energy efficiency, installing a heat pump, installing solar panels or solar energy. You need financial support, creative, not necessarily subsidies, but you can have very creative financial instruments that help people to tackle the upfront investment because in the long term they will save from it. It's very important to get the long-term saving as a consumer message. But you also need a reliable advice. One-stop shops in municipalities to support people take the right decision. You don't necessarily need to fully retrofit your house, depending on where you live, if you want to install a heat pump. You need skilled installers. A lot of reskilling and upskilling needs to be done in that sector in order for consumers to be, reassured that there is not somebody just, we say in French, bricolé with your system, and this is something that needs to be done. And please get rid of red tape. In some countries, if you want to put solar panels on your roof, it takes you ages. In Bulgaria, it's 3 years. You don't get, an emergency problem solved with this type of administrative headache. So you really need all hands on deck, meaning also that the administration needs to help people who want to become energy efficient and put the most efficient, let's say, electric system in their house. That's all I wanted to say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. The voice of the customer. I will move in a second a bit to some Q&A in the room, so prepare your questions, please. But before we go there, Simone, you spoke in your presentation that you still lack some decisive points here and there. Perhaps let me turn it around. If you would be at the drawing table old school top-down model, what would be your top 3 interventions in the markets today?
For the short.
For the future.
For the future. Well, then I would like to give a comment on what has been said because it's very important. For the future, I would say, again, we have to create, we have to help the system to create liquidity into a long-term exchange platform. This is a key topic where you may find all the services, all the products you need in the energy market, which is energy, which is decarbonized energy, which is security of supply, which is flexibility. And in order to do that, probably the best way is to create some kind of centralized demand, as much pan-European as possible, because we don't want to have fragmented market, we want to have integrated markets. And to give through this centralized demand, which is needed because once you have targets, again, you need some demand in order to be sure that you achieve the targets, to create a market reference which may enable players to exchange energy under long-term condition by having this market as a reference, as a benchmark. Probably something may be done in terms of, for example, of guarantee management for long-term contracts, because cost of guarantee is one of the major constraints when customers want to subscribe a long-term contract. But this is, I would say, this is the most important factor, which is again not for blaming the functioning of the market as it is, which delivered. I fully share your view. Delivered up to a certain point. It is an efficient way to manage what you have in the best of possible ways and to integrate markets. What is not delivering is addressing the needs of investment. But if I may just add a little point on the short term, because what has been said is very important. On the short term, we have to do basically 2 things. First one is being selective. We may not help everybody. It doesn't make much sense that probably that system may help me or you. Right? We have to be selective. And a large part of the measures which have been put in place are not selective. We must have an European model, because otherwise the consequence will be, again, fragmentation and disruption in the market. And may act fast in order to reduce the causes of high prices. Again, the proposal of capping the gas price on the TTF market is one proposal, but the best way is to get rid of the need of buying this gas as much as possible. And what I want to say, because you were mentioning REPowerEU and Toolbox, I think that what the European Commission did on the Toolbox was very important. I have the impression, maybe, I'm wrong, but that it was probably, it was not fast enough to avoid that member states went ahead, and then it was a kind of, of running in parallel. But what has been put in the REPowerEU in terms of measures for the permitting issue, which has been raised, is incredible. And that's really, it's not in order to flatter you because you are sitting next to me, but I believe that it's very important to highlight that the incredible effort that the Commission put in place in order to overcome the local barrier preventing investment in renewables, which are the most important and relevant issue today. I mean, there are the technologies, there are the companies, there are the finance, there is the need, there are the economics, waiting for years and years to put your solar panel in your roof in Bulgaria, or 5 years, 10 years to have your authorization in Italy and France is not compatible with anything. Reduction of prices, decarbonization target, and security of supply.
Thank you, Simone. So we're going to try to open up a little bit for questions to the panel as a total, or to somebody specifically. Is there any question in the panel? Sorry, in the audience for the panel on this topic, or a remark, a comment? This is your moment to influence the decision-making process. There's a question on the back there. The gentleman there in the middle with the blue jacket, although that's probably true for half of the audience.
Thank you. Paul Gisperts, Energie Nederland, the Dutch Energy Association. Question for Christophe. Christophe, I liked a lot what you said at the beginning. Very reluctant on short-term measures, short-term interventions. Later in your intervention, you actually also opened the door for interventions by mentioning the price valve mechanism, which in my understanding is another word for a price cap, just maybe with some limitations when to use it. But in the end, it remains a price cap. It remains the same intervention, so with the risk of not being effective and probably even, or most likely even causing counter desirable effects, causing more damage for society. So the question is, can you give any concrete example when such a price valve mechanism would actually be useful?
I fully agree with you, Paul, that this is not a silver bullet solution for sure, and we are fully aware of the drawbacks of such a solution, because indeed it includes the concept of price cap. But the big difference with the other ideas that were presented, for instance, this temporary gas price idea, the big difference is that it will be an ex-ante measure. We will define the triggering mechanism before, and the idea is to limit the regulatory uncertainty for investors. So this is the big difference, ex-ante versus ex-post. And when I follow the discussion at European level, the heated discussion, I have the impression that the main priority for our politicians nowadays is to limit, is not exactly what Eurelectrica has in mind, to give regulatory certainty, some comfort for the future revenue. The priority looks like, I have the feeling, to limit excessive profits made by some companies. So again, this relief valve concept could be a way to, could be a good compromise, giving some certainty, ex-ante measures, some regulatory certainty, that limiting the risk of regulatory uncertainty for investors, while keeping a safety valve and protect consumers. But again, the big difference is ex-ante versus ex-post measures.
Gentleman there, also blue jacket.
Yeah, blue jacket. Pietro Rabassi from Nord Pool, which is the largest European power market. I have a question for Christophe or Paula, whoever wants to take it. So we've been speaking about the role of renewables, but at the same time we know that there are quite a few challenges when it comes to congestions, huge redispatch costs in many of the countries, and integration of renewables also, challenges the current market design. So what do you think of the role of flexibility markets, and especially decentralized flexibility markets? And if you think that they can play an important role, why don't you push for an harmonized regulatory framework in Europe? Because it's not the case. There are some countries which do have the right one, some others that don't. Thank you.
Flexibility markets. Christophe, yeah?
I will start, and if you want to complement, Paula. Thank you for the question. Two things. The first thing is that we are working on a potential network code for demand response, and this could be addressed in this framework. We recently received a nice letter from the European Commission inviting us to prepare a framework guidelines for a new network code. So this is one issue that could be addressed through this framework. But you mentioned the flexibility concept market. I know that Eurelectric is really fond of this idea. I'm sure that this market could contribute to facilitate the integration of renewable. But for me, the flexibility markets are also quite close to the redispatching model. This is nothing but maybe a more sophisticated redispatching market. And I really don't think that we can solve the problem of congestions in Europe with a redispatching market. I strongly doubt that we will be able to solve the problem of congestion through a redispatching, a generalized redispatching market. I have my strong doubt about that. And again, I have sometimes the impression that this flexibility market are nothing but than a generalization of this redispatching market.
Paula, perhaps a comment from your side?
Thank you for the question. And indeed, Christophe said there is also work going on, notably through the network codes. Another aspect of it, which is not mentioned times enough, is the digitalization potential, which will allow further for this flexibility. And a further aspect, which is also not, in my view, spoken about times enough, is the storage, the necessary storage that we will need in order to really make the best out of the renewables and even the renewables targets that we have to really seize the potential and really decrease the share that we need in terms of backload, be it from gas or other. So that all this will contribute to flexibility, and it's work which is going on, and notably, as said, through the digitalization of the energy system, and we'll come out with a very detailed action plan later in the year precisely on this.
Thank you. Monique, final comments, and then we need to wrap up.
Just on flexibility, because it can also, of course, private residential housing can also contribute through flexibility, feeding in and, you know, when solar is high. And there I would just give this as an example, as an illustration, how this is a headache for people, because the administrative system around that is very unfriendly to consumers, because you don't get rewarded for what you're feeding into the grid, and that how would you react if you're not rewarded, you're not interested? So it's very important to also keep that in mind if you want to promote at least consumer participation in the market.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop it, sorry, because I know people will get angry at me, but hopefully you can connect offline. So I'm going to try to wrap up this conversation with the risk that they're going to miss half of it and the other half might be wrong. But I think we didn't discuss the importance of markets, because that's a given, right? So market model, I think, has been a given throughout here. There was a very clear signaling from everybody that we need to protect the vulnerable customers on the short term, but we shouldn't distort the full system in that attempt to protect. So I think we need to be very tactical, very segmented. We talked about European markets, European integration. I heard Christophe talking about some measures that we still need to implement, so I would say let's crack on with that. You mentioned, Simone, we have the technologies, we just need now to use them. I really like that statement, because yes, innovation is important, but a lot is already there. Of course, the cost needs to go down, but the cost will go down when you start to scale, so it's a win-win. So I think there is a lot of positiveness there. And Monique, I really liked your point on customer experience or customer adoption, because even for engineers, tried it myself, it's quite difficult to get your house insulated and solar panels, let alone the perhaps a little bit more less educated person that just want to get the good service and somebody taking care of it. And you need to have a remuneration for some reason. And perhaps a final comment on flexibility markets. I can't predict the future, but I could say something like baseload, structured PPAs, perhaps micro PPAs that you can trade, and probably something which is more of a short-term flexibility market to resolve flexibility as wholesale level and potentially something similar at distribution level. So still market systems, but we need to redesign, taking care for the renewables. So with that, give me a round of applause for the panel, and thank you very much for listening.